like here today, it's exactly the same. You need somebody with experience. If you're going to talk about overcoming obstacles, that David's just read the blurb from the book about the obstacles that I faced. And that book and the next 10 years of my life was in recovery and in rehabilitation, in learning how to do everything that was taken away from me, which is very similar to what you were talking about with your business. And I realised that there are certain elements, there are certain what I believe are truths in behind overcoming obstacles, even if they're from physical injury or from financial injury. And I've fallen off a cliff, but I'm sure you can all tell me of people who have actually fallen off their own financial cliff, and whether it be relationship or marriage or business, whatever. There's a lot of that going on. And when people know about my book, they say, oh, well, let me tell you about my cliff. And it seems that everybody has got a particular cliff. And over 10 years rehab, you pick up a few things. I had a serious head injury, so my learning was quite slow. But there were some things that I picked up along the way. And these were, a lot of them took me in between 5, 6 and 7 years to actually get a grab, because beforehand, before the accident, I was very much someone who would just go ahead and do it with aggression, and do it with rage, and do it with passion, as you were speaking about before. But I did not have that ability at that time, so I had this furnace burning inside of me and no way to move it, no way to actually do something about the thoughts that were in my mind. And the first real reason that I learned, because that was doing me more injury than my actual injuries were, this burning fire inside of me, and not being able to do anything, not being able to even speak and explain to my therapist what was going on, what I needed help with. I had to learn the first step towards any of these things was, number one, was taking a deep breath, just slowing down. We can easily get so caught up in all the things that we have to do, and all the people that we've got to see, and all these so-called solutions. And you would know in the businesses at this table here that it seems that there are some solutions that work, but there are a million others that are out there that really have no credibility. And people get sucked into this. We can easily be very distracted in trying to overcome obstacles, whereas really all we've got to do is follow a couple of simple steps. But that bypasses, because we get so worked up and get so excited, and the media want to continue to tell you that there is something wrong with you, that you need this, and for just your credit card details, we'll give it to you. You can get so caught up in that atmosphere that sometimes you haven't sat back and thought, now wait a second, what happened here? Because quite often, and the GFC is a wonderful situation, as well as people who are suffering bankrupt, they don't get bankrupt overnight. They've actually put themselves on a path for a long period of time that's led to bankruptcy. It is something that has occurred simply because they have reached the end of that path. If they've been on the path of bankruptcy for a long time and they've justified their way through that path, that's simply the day that they've arrived, the day they get the letter from the Australian Taxation Office or whatever it might be. That is saying, congratulations, you've arrived at the end of the path that you've been on for X amount of months, years, decades. The GFC is a great example. The world has been on this path for 20 plus years. But when people stop to look at where actually am I headed, that's the first issue that we get to. Because we're all on a path to somewhere. Our thoughts, our actions are heading us in some particular direction, and we are going to arrive. No path is eternal. I know religious people might say something different, but I'm talking about in this world, in this context. For example, I live at Carindale. I had to get on the freeway and go north and then just follow along to get to Milton here. It didn't matter how much I believed I was going to the Gold Coast. It didn't matter how much I dreamt of the Gold Coast. It didn't matter how many pictures of the Gold Coast I had in my car. It doesn't matter what I visualised about arriving at Surfers Paradise. By the same token, it doesn't matter how much I don't want Milton. All of those things are irrelevant to the fact that I'm actually on the path to Milton. And the moment arrived when I was here. Congratulations, you've reached the end of your path. And with obstacles, quite often we have actually created those obstacles along the way, and we have justified our way out of thinking about them, or we have not wanted to look at them, or we have not wanted to move. Instead, we get caught up in the, just moving on culture. You can't move on until you've learnt your lesson as to why you are here, which is why there's talk about GFC 2 coming, because we haven't actually solved the problem. People have said, I want to move on. Let's just move on from this. Let's just deny that this exists. And I've heard it from many business people. I refuse to admit that there's a GFC, that there's a recession. Well, then there's no luck for you, because there is. And unless you can deal with this situation, you're not going to find a solution. And I guess it goes back into my story here, which is a lot of that issue, a lot of the obstacle, getting over the obstacles that we're speaking about. It is quite often understanding that these things have happened for a particular reason. And I'm not talking about the spiritual reason, if that's the way that you like to think of it. But you are here because that is part of your path, or maybe that is the end of your path. And if this obstacle has reached your position right now, and you jump over it and refuse to admit it, then it's going to be bigger next time. And then bigger next time. It's not until you actually say, okay, what's in this for me? What am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to pick up? Why am I here? Why has this occurred? And it comes back to looking at certain events, and I look at that event, and I now look at that event as a lesson instead of an injury. If that moment was a moment of tragedy and I looked at it as a tragedy, I'd be thinking of who's to blame, whose fault is it, how can I get out of this? I'd be looking at all of the negative aspects that came from it. Instead, somewhere along the line, probably about year 5 or 6, I started to look at it as being, okay, this is what I've got, this is the reality. I'm going to look at it as a lesson. And as soon as you look at exactly the same event as a lesson, you start to think of, what am I supposed to learn from this? How did this happen? Who do I need to see that will help me move on from this, and who will help me learn the lesson? Because in that situation, I had a major head injury, so my level of understanding was incredibly limited. But it's amazing how many people have that sort of injury financially and don't get people like yourselves involved until it's too late. When they've tried every possible excuse they've got and every justification, but they just can't do it, then you're a last resort instead of a first resort. I can see that I'm on this path, and I can now see the end of this path. I've been on this path so long that I can now see the end of it, and I don't want to get there, so I'd better change paths pretty quickly. Now, in order to do that, and that's, I guess, the second part, is that looking ahead is very, very valuable, but sometimes we've got to stop and look down at where we actually are right now. And our heads are often filled so much with, you've always got to look ahead. Well, if you don't look down, you won't see what path you're actually on. You can easily trick yourself into creating a vision that isn't there, that isn't the end of your path. For example, that whole thing that I said about the highway. I can visualise Gold Coast, but I'm going north from South Brisbane. So I ain't going to get to the Gold Coast. So it doesn't matter me visualising it. Very important that you visualise the right thing. But to understand the end of the path means that you've got to see, well, what path am I actually on? And that comes down to looking for evidence, looking for hardcore, tangible evidence that says, I want proof as to where I am right now. Not what I think, certainly not what I tell people, and certainly not what I have people believe. I want to know the truth of where I am. Financially, it's very simple. Let's have a look at your bank account. That's evidence. If it's a weight issue, okay, let's stand on the scales. Let's get down to some hardcore evidence that actually says this is where you are. If you choose to deny it, that's your call. But the result is that you weigh this, or you have this much money owing, or whatever it might be. This is your income, this is your budget, this is how much you spend, this is how much you save, whatever it might be. It often brings it back down to home when you sit down and you look at what is the evidence. Maybe it's a relationship evidence. If you're not spending enough time with your kids or your wife, like you were suggesting, Roger, you made changes because you didn't like where this was going. So you made changes, and it's difficult to make changes. We don't want to make changes. The way the brain develops at certain ages, by the time you're 35, or approximately 35, you've pretty well decided that this is me. This is what I do. This is who I am. You try and change it, you got problems. It's sort of like crossing your legs and folding your arms the wrong way. No matter how motivated you are, pretty soon your brain's going to say, this is not how you sit. You can try and kid yourself and kid other people, but this isn't right, and sooner or later I'm going to actually cause you pain so that you'll think, I've got to be free of this and go back to what I know the best. This is how I sit. Yes, I feel at home now. This is the way that we are with any sort of change. We might start with a really strong motivation, the reason why. But after a while, the thoughts get into our mind of, this isn't me, I'm not pulling this off. And pretty soon you start getting angry and you start getting anxious and you start getting your head filled with all the things you've got to do, and you forget to start breathing, which is what I was talking about before. You've got to breathe. But if you want to change that personal identity, if you want to change who you are, then as far as I know from my own experience, the only way you can change who you are that lasts is by creating new evidence. And creating that new evidence again and again and again and again. Because to me, evidence is like food for a child. Your personal identity being that child. Whichever one you feed the most grows the biggest. Whichever one you feed the less goes away. If you are, for example, well, let's say, now I'm not, but let's say use the example that I'm a smoker. So you start to develop your entire life around when you can have that cigarette, because every time you have a cigarette it confirms to you that yes, you're a smoker. When you give it up, I'm a non-smoker, your brain's going, yeah, no you're not. No. And you look at things differently, and all of a sudden you see people smoking and you think, all your environment begins to change. But the more you say, I'm a non-smoker, and the more you say no, that voice eventually starts to quieten down and say, yeah, I can see how now, but if you have one cigarette, you're back on that wagon. It's changing the evidence so you can say, one step at a time, because you can only go down one path. You can only go down one path. People say, I'm on two paths. No, you can't drive your car down two roads at the same time. If you think you can, you're mistaken. You can't. You're on one path and you're going in one direction. So to overcome obstacles, first of all, you've got to look at what path you're actually on. Because that will highlight what obstacles are about to hit you, what lie in the future, and it will also start to give you a magnificent brain the opportunity to think of, what's the way to get around these? What should I be doing now? Denial doesn't work, as I found out. The people who know me know that I was going to have a very serious accident. People were always saying to me, you're an accident, looking for somewhere to happen. So when everyone found out that I'd fallen 30 metres off a cliff, no one was really surprised, except for me, because I just didn't believe it was going to happen. I'm too smart, I'm too tough, I'm too everything, except for too unrealistic. I was living the life of destruction. That was my path. The day that I arrived was simply the day that I fell off a cliff. It was an accident, I didn't do it on purpose, but I'd been heading there. If I'd have listened to people, if I'd have stopped being so distracted by all of the things of a teenager, if I'd have stopped and thought, now wait a second, what's actually going on here? What am I doing by behaving this way? How am I actually living my life? What point am I going to reach? That day would never have come, but that day did come, and it took me 10 years to get over it. And most of those 10 years to learn that that was a lesson, that who I used to be, I can't be that person again. As you know, with people who go bankrupt, they make a firm resolve about, I won't do all of those things again, I won't have this again. But there are some people who do. For example, there are some people who leave jail and think, that's it, I'm going on the straight and narrow, but it doesn't always work out that way, because we've got this incredible desire to continue to return to who we know we are, even if we don't like that. That's what we know. And once again, the only way that I know is to create enough evidence, consecutive, frequent evidence that says, no, you are now this person. and it's tough, and it takes discipline, and it's not popular, and it's inconvenient, and it's painful, and it's all the things that we try and avoid. But after you start to get positive feedback and positive results, all of those things start to fade away. It's just like driving a car. First time you get behind the wheel with those foot pedals, you're confused. There's so many things you've got to do. And it's a stress to get behind the wheel of a car. Then all of a sudden, one day, you get in behind the wheel of a car and it just makes sense. You just know what to do. You've got to go through that period of learning to reach that point. And these days in this society, you're not encouraged to do that. You're encouraged that there are simple and easy steps. This will be convenient for you. This will be easy for you. If you believe it strong enough, it will come. And if it doesn't come, it's your fault because you didn't believe it enough or you listened to the wrong secrets. Well, there are no secrets. To me, the word secrets means this is a secret, which means that you don't have to work very hard, but you can have it all. I don't exist in that world. I learned the hard way that I get what I've earned. I only get what I've earned. And if I haven't earned it, I won't get it. If by some freak of nature it is given to me, because I haven't earned it, I won't know how to keep it. And when I lose it, I won't know how to get it back because it was an accident that I got the first time. Earning something and going through those processes that we've known right the way through mankind but seem to have forgotten in the last 20 years because the marketing wagon is sort of teaching you that you don't have to because they know that sells. So it seems to get a lot of people in the position of we want someone else to fix it because we shouldn't have to. Well, that's why they got in the position to start off with. So overcoming obstacles, first take a deep breath. Second, have a look at what path you're actually on. Because that's where you're headed. And one day, at the least convenient moment, you're going to arrive. And the third thing is to figure out what works, to surround yourself with people that do know, that have had the experience, that do have the knowledge. Get on that path and stay on that path. And it's very easy to find an off-ramp and get back onto the path that we know. But that's where part of this discipline comes into place. Just because there's an offshoot there, does not mean that I've got to take it. And the more you say no to, the more you're likely to say yes to and just keep on the same path. You get tempted, but no. Here comes a cigarette, but no. Here comes an opportunity, but no. And the more you say that, the more evidence you've got in your mind that you can say no. But you can also say yes to the things that you should be saying yes to. So obstacles are part of life, but they're there for a particular reason. They're there to teach you a lesson of, you brought this your way, what are you going to do with it? And if you don't deal with it in those particular ways, then you'll reach the point where you've got that same obstacles, but of a much bigger stance, of a much bigger area. You're not able to justify your way out of this one as easily. So overcoming obstacles is, unfortunately, it is a matter of setting yourself on the right path and being willing to work hard, get your hands dirty, and most important, being willing to do what needs to be done instead of jumping off the bandwagon because it gets too hard. And the people that do that are the people that overcome obstacles. The people who don't do that are the people who are continually met with more and more. Thank you very much. I had that for 15 minutes.
Questions? We've got a little bit of time for some questions if anybody's got questions for Steve.
I read your book.
Just then? Well, you were flicking through it. I thought, oh, wow.
Speed reader.
I got it from my wife, Louise Coskelly, who's
Of course.
hospital.
Yes.
So you gave her a book, so I read one of your previous
Oh,
books.
excellent.
So I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it? You saw that's the word?
I did enjoy it.
Oh, that's good. Excuse me, my eye twitches every now and again. Now you know why. So it's not that I'm winking at you, even though you are very attractive. I just get into
You're appealing after all.
So it's an amazing story. So the secret of, we all understand if we